the land of my fathers, the home of the free.
Welcome to the book of Obadiah. Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament, and it was written in response to the southern kingdom's exile at the hand of the Babylonians into Babylon. And what's interesting is that in this book, God is speaking to the people of Edom, not Israel, not the southern kingdom of Judah, but to Edom. Who is Edom, you may be wondering? Good question. Let's think back all the way to the book of Genesis. In Genesis, Isaac and Rebekah, they were married as we know, and they had twin sons, Jacob and Esau. God spoke prophetically that even though Jacob was the younger of the twins, he would rule over his brother Esau, and they had a bit of a tense relationship, these two brothers did, growing up. Jacob got married, as did Esau, and of course Jacob had 12 sons, one of whom was Joseph, as we know, and they all moved down into Egypt, and they developed, as we know, into a great nation, the nation of Israel, with 12 tribes, of course, coming from the 12 sons that they had. So Jacob's sons grew into becoming the nation of Israel. Now, like I said, Esau also married, and he also had children, and Esau's descendants became known as Edom. So you've got Jacob's descendants, known as Israel, and Esau's descendants known as Edom. So that is who Edom is. Fast forward about 12 or 1300 years, and we are in our time frame here in the book of Obadiah. And as God had warned through his prophets, the king of Babylon came against the southern kingdom of Judah and destroyed the city and the temple, taking its people into exile. However, what happened was Edom, of course the descendants of Esau, who lived just south of Jerusalem, not too far, and south of the Dead Sea, instead of supporting their distant relatives, they took advantage of them and mistreated them. They invaded some of their other cities and even killed some of the people. And God is really not happy with the nation of Edom for what they did to God's people. Even though God was judging his people, sending them into exile, he didn't want Edom to mistreat them. And so in Obadiah chapter 1, there is only one chapter, from verse 10, we read these words. It says, God speaking to Edom. He says, because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off their wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. These are some of the things that the distant relatives of Judah had done, the descendants of Esau, Edom. And even though God was bringing judgment upon his people, he was very unhappy that Edom took advantage of their disaster and did what they did, mistreating their own distant relatives, their brothers as he called them. And God says, because of how Edom has treated Israel, he's going to bring judgment on Edom and bring them down. He will do to them what they did to God's exiles. And so God addresses their sin of pride. He exposes the root of Edom's downfall. In verse 3, he says, the pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks. Edom's sense of security nestled high in the mountains, which is where they were geographically located, and their wealth, their alliances, their wisdom, their military strength gave them a false sense of confidence and pride. They believed themselves to be untouchable and above consequence and above reproach. But God declares in verse 4, though you soar like the eagle and make your nest amongst the stars, from there I will bring you down. This is a timeless warning for us today, how pride precedes a fall. When individuals or even nations elevate themselves, trusting in their own strength and might and mistreating others, it's only a matter of time before God brings them down and brings judgment. God is not pleased with pride, nor is he pleased with indifference. Through Obadiah, God calls out Edom not just for its pride, but for its passivity and indifference to the suffering of the southern kingdom and the destruction of Jerusalem. In verse 11, God says, on the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth, you were like one of them. The Edomites watched their brother's calamity and joined in the looting and the violence. And so God, like I said, is going to bring judgment on Edom for how it's treated the exiles. In verse 15, God says, as you have done, it will be done to you. God is displeased with indifference to other people's suffering. It's not enough for us to just avoid doing harm. We are also called to actively seek justice and mercy. Indifference in the face of suffering is wrong. Our faith, our true faith, is revealed not only in the evil we avoid, but in the good that we pursue for others. And God finally also spoke of a day of restoration. Judgment was not to be the final word for God's people who went into exile. Even though God did speak words of judgment through his various prophets, as we've been looking at, God always and often spoke words of hope and restoration for their future. And we see this in Obadiah 2 in verses 17 and verses 21, where God says, but on Mount Zion will be deliverance, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. You see, God's ultimate purpose is not destruction, but restoration and redemption and repentance. Sin has to be dealt with, of course. Thankfully, now Jesus Christ has dealt with the powers of sin and the consequences of sin once and for all. There is always hope with God. Let's learn from this experience of Edom's behavior. Let's not walk in pride. Let's not be indifferent to the suffering of others. Let's not gloat over the destruction or misfortune of others, but instead be people who bring help and justice and kindness and mercy, seeking to do good. As I've said before, as God succinctly puts it in Micah chapter 6 verse 8, God has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
The land of my fathers